Welcome to this meeting of the Community Services Committee. Any apologies for?
No apologies, Chair.
Any declarations of interest? I was mentioned during the meeting if you find an item that you need to in respect of.
Chair, for everything a bit tardy, I think out of abundant caution, given we're talking about the park management plan and the park having been acquired from SADC in the recent past, I'm reminded, as a abundant caution, to declare an opportunity interest in being a member of the Law District Council.
Okay. A few of us who are district councillors too, so we'll take that under advice because that might be a bit remote.
Yes, Chair. So I think given the update, I'm going to be referring to some liaison with the District Council. It's probably wise to declare an interest in line with Council Butterworth.
Okay, so all district councillors make the same one then.
Yep.
Okay, right, thank you. Three chairman's report and urgent items. I don't have anything to go in there. Okay, any public questions?
None, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting on the 15th of September. Can I sign those as a free record? Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, minutes of other meetings referred to the Community Services Committee. This is really the Christmas Carnival working party meetings and the Rothamsted Park subcommittee meetings. I think we're just receiving them. Has anybody got any comments on those items that they want to point out? Matthew?
I think, in fairness, the minutes don't say very much. The main work of the committee is working towards a management plan, and therefore there's nothing of substance for this committee to look at until we get a management plan, with the exception, of course, of what the clerk is going to say about the soil relaying area.
Okay. Thanks. When do we anticipate getting a plan?
So, Chair, so the plan will come to this committee in January. That's the plan as it stands at the moment. I have got an update later in the agenda.
That's 7.5. Okay, fine. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll consider those reports received. Now moving on to the officer reports. That's 7.1 starting 19. Board planner and resolution tracker. Anybody got anything to add to the items on here? Things they want to raise? So we are asked to, this is 8.1, and to approve subject to any comments or amendments, the forward planner attached to Appendix A. 2.1.2, note the resolution tracker attached to Appendix B and approve the removal of those resolutions marked complete. Okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Very much. Right. Item 7.2, starting on page 27, actual expenditure position. We just need to remind ourselves that under local authority accounting, red is good. It's a positive variance. We spend less money. Table on page 30, I think, indicates the main variance reason is reduced staff costs. Presumably that's due to not replacing people quickly.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, basically, I think all the other items are relatively small. Do you want to say something about the grounds maintenance contract? Which is the only other item of any.
So I think the main thing with the grounds maintenance contract is that we always strive to try to reduce that if possible. There may also be an element in there that we haven't yet taken over the new recreation grounds as well, which of course would have had an aspect of that budget too.
Sorry, they haven't taken over yet.
The four.
I did say
grounds
no,
were taken over from St Albans.
While we're on that subject, will you be commenting on how we've got to?
Yes, Jay, I can do that now. There's probably not another natural place to do that, so I can do that linked to the budget side of things. So essentially where we are at the moment with the 4 recreation grounds that we are looking to transfer, I've now had the document for one of those sent through to me, which we are having a look at, and we're waiting for the remaining 3 to come through to us. Slightly surprised that we didn't get them all at once, but the one that we've got is for Oakley Road, which if there was 1 or 2 that we were going to get, we'd quite like to get the Brownwood and the Wood End ones for obvious reasons linked to the Bay Area item later on. So we've got one. We're hopeful that we will get the others soon.
This year?
So I don't think now we will transfer the assets before Christmas. I think that's unrealistic now. And we will take them all as a package. So it certainly will be the new year now.
Okay. Well, I did give the administration a prod at the last policy committee, so that's at least you've got one moving. If they haven't been received before the next policy committee of district, can you let me know? I'll raise it again. Because I mean, I can't, we're working with standardised documents. I can't see what the delay is. Ridiculous. But that's the way it goes. So,
Would they not all be identical apart from the name? In other words, is there not some sense in having sent one, because any comments on that they can then replicate in the other 3?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I don't think that's the logic to sending one, I must admit, but potentially. I mean, there are nuances across the sites that will lead to very different wording slightly on some elements. But of course, we've already got template documents in the case of Batford Springs Nature Reserve or Portsmouth Park, which are very similar to these sites. So yes, there could be, the comments could be cross-cutting, but we would like to consider them all together, because if they are suggesting slightly different wording in different ones, we'd quite like to look at that collectively before we agree the wording on one. So yeah, it's certainly not ideal, Chair, the situation we find ourselves in.
okay, we'll do what we can do. Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I think I worked it out. Perhaps more of an explanation in the text that might have got me there quicker. In that the big figures, I've got the general income 212,000, and then the one of 5,000 below from Park received cost 100,000, and I can see how they fit in. It's slightly odd that the grant funding is income, because it is capital, and same with the building costs. But I wonder if the clerk could just talk us through that, just in case I haven't understood it correctly as to what's going on with those particular figures. Okay. Yeah, and it's more a presentational thing than querying, underlying what they are.
Yeah, so happy to, and we can provide more narrative in future ones. So this is essentially the items under environment downwards that you're referring to in here. Yeah. So the grant funding from Park is the essentially the value that Park credibly raised towards the play area and has passed over to the town council. part of the wording for that is worded in a way in order to ensure that we can account for this in the best possible way for the town council, which is why it refers to grants. The item below that, the 9,800, refers to the essentially a move from the reserve to top up the difference between the original town council allocation for the play area, the park grant, and the balance basically. So that's what that covers off. The Orchard Pavilion cost, which I heard Councillor Butterworth mention, that is the £100,000 that came over to us as part of the transfer of Rockhampton Park, where we insisted on District Council providing that to us. Was there any other specifics within there?
No, it's more that the presentation that they're all counted as income, including their receipts, but they're more in nature of, so they're not annual receipts. Anyway, they are what they are, and thank you very much for the explanation.
Yeah, so I think this links back to your original point around the local government county side of things is a bit bizarre in places. So income is essentially anything that wasn't already set out in the general budget, if you like, as expenditure.
Thank you.
Any other points people would like to raise or queries or anything on this one? Okay. So recommendation 2.1, note the report, note the release of the reserve set out in paragraph 3.2. All in favour? Very much. Okay, now on to 7.3. To set out the proposed options of the public realm improvement. Have we got any slides of this one?
Yeah, we have, Chair, actually, and just a few introductory words, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So, thank you, Chair. So, the report you've got in front of you here is the latest position on our public realm improvement plan, which you'll recall is a plan that we're looking to put in place for a number of public realm spaces across the High Street, but also areas of Batford and Southdown as well. In January and early next year, we will be bringing forward the actual action plan element of this that says how we're going to bring things to life. But what we thought we would do is bring to this meeting a kind of an update as to where we are and some of the kind of the broad thinking that we've done internally, but also reflecting some of the comments we've heard from this committee previously, but also the survey that we carried out with the public some time ago now, actually. So what you have in terms of the images in the pack, the images on these slides are slightly updated and they're kind of just for a kind of a visual representation. So I appreciate they're not sort of expertly done, but they try to bring to life a bit more as to what we're thinking. There are some key areas that we just put in front of you on this report this evening, but I know the Harding Parade, which is in front of you, will actually be given further consideration at council at the end of this month, when some county council officers will be presenting to our council some of the visions for the station improvements, which do include Harding Parade. So whilst we've got kind of comments on them this evening, there will be a further opportunity to talk about that at the end of this month. So in terms of the areas that we've got in front of you this evening, the fountain area is probably one of the most predominant changes. So there are a number of key features to this. Firstly, we would like to actually get the fountain working. Historically, there has been some small fixes to the fountain, which hasn't actually ended up in a kind of a long-term solution. So we do need to do some stuff underground to get that sorted. We'd like to introduce better surfacing in this area, more consistent surfacing, in particular on some of what were kind of formerly grass areas that are just now worn down into kind of hard, compacted mud. So this space itself is really well used for people just to sit, take their lunch, perhaps wait for buses, just relax. So the idea here is to introduce some screening just to make it slightly more discreet away from the road, because whilst it is a nice space, you do have obviously a very busy road going past. So additional screening, getting the fountain up and running, one of the areas for a new defibrillator, and offering opportunity for more current and increased commercial trading. So you'll know that we have some stall traders on this area at the moment. You'll also know that previously I've talked about potential opportunities with other existing restaurants in town for the area that's just behind the bus stop to the right of this. So these proposals here would help us potentially enable that to happen by improving the surfacing. So if I run through all the slides, Chair, and then there's not too many, and we can take questions. The second area is the Sensory Garden, which is probably a mix of improvements, some improving what's there already, but actually some brand new things. So the key element of this area is, as a sensory garden, we kind of feel like it's not particularly sensory at the moment. So we would like to improve that by looking at and rejuvenating the planting scheme, making it much more thoughtful and stimulating. We'd like to increase or introduce some screening to the left-hand side as you go in, just to cover around the main sort of sensory garden area, to again have it a bit more discreet and block off some of the noise from the road. With all the screening that we're suggesting, we're suggesting kind of living screening, if you like, so that has kind of some benefits in itself. Then the main additions in this part is some kind of nature-themed play type interactive equipment for children. Now, one of the reasons we're suggesting this here links to trying to improve the high street and trying to get more people to stay longer in the high street, which is one of our two improvements. So firstly, getting people to the high street. So things like our large events and our other initiatives we run, but actually when they're there, trying to get them to stay as long as possible. Those are two of the actions or findings that have come out with the numerous studies that have been done on high streets over the years. So this one here, some interactive play equipment, nature-based, for some children to interact with, and again, a defibrillator. We have got a beaded artwork on the floor in the sensory garden area at the moment, which was a lovely piece of work and probably has suffered from being on the floor, because obviously it gets walked over an awful lot and it takes a bit of a battering. So as part of that, we would like to relocate and kind of refurb that into a different part of the Sensory Garden, not on the floor, somewhere else that it can get looked after. And then we've got Harding Parade. So the key parts of Harding Parade is that essentially the raised beds and the trees at the moment are, if that's your first impression into Harpenden, if you get off the station, it's not a very good one. And so what we're looking to try to do here is completely strip back that area, have new seating, some new low-level planting, but having a much more attractive area as you first come around that corner into the town. There are some commercial trading opportunities potentially on the street here, although those won't be something we could realise as a town council, because the land on which the trading would be is actually county council land, so we wouldn't benefit from that. The strip that you see here, that is the seating and the planters and the cycle storage, is district council owned at the moment. So the idea has been historically that the town council would look to take ownership of that in order to deliver those sorts of improvements. As I say, again, this is something that we're going to look at more detail at council, and you'll see the difference between our local designer, who's very, very good, but the very expensive county council designers that have been working on their schemes. So there's two completely different styles you'll see from that, but the principles are exactly the same. So I think I'll stop there for now, Chair, and take any questions or initial thoughts.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much. I really love this. I think this is exactly what we should be doing. I just have a few questions on, actually, each of them, if that's okay. The first one on the fountain area. Do the toilets stay? Okay, okay, wasn't sure. Then on the sensory garden, is it just going to be, I mean, that's brilliant, the nature, we talked about this 2 years ago, I think, before the lockdown, it's absolutely great. Is it just going to be for younger children, or is there scope to consider something that all ages would love, like a ping pong table or something?
Yeah, Chair. So we haven't considered things like ping pong tables. We do have to be cautious in that area around some of the health and safety elements of play. So that's why we've kept it as kind of interactive, kind of nature themed, because we do start then getting into proximity to road and that sort of stuff. So in that particular area, we haven't considered anything for younger people, older children, or young people.
For young people.
Yeah, or young people at heart. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if, it's something that we could just keep in the back of our mind or with the wider group when we come to it as a discussion point. And then, the Harding Parade, I think that would be great to talk to county about. I know that I've often parked my bike on that corner with lots of other bikes, and it's just to avoid that ride up to the station, because if you go up to the station, you've got that hill up and there's taxis and people dropping others off. It's really unsafe to cycle, just as background, if you don't cycle to the station. So I often park my bike up there and feel safer because you have those bicycles there. But that's going to be a challenge, I think, too, because that would be really the bike storage when it's becoming official. But it's also a good thing. Like, it would be great, but it will be a victim of its own success. So that's really all.
Okay, Councillor Camp.
I wanted to know fountain area. What's the height of the trellis? What's the height of you've got in mind?
So we haven't got to that stage yet, Chair, of deciding that, but it would need to be some. So we're trying to create a space that's more discreet, but doesn't completely block things out, because we recognise that for practical reasons, people need to be able to see whether a bus is coming and stuff like that. So we would have to take guidance on that. We haven't looked at that sort of detail yet. So if there was something in mind that would be an appropriate height, then we would be keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think I would be concerned if it was too high and it became enclosed, and therefore a hidden area where you can encourage antisocial behaviour at the end of the evening. It's a place it would have to be something that was open enough, I think, so that people could see what's going on in that area. The other thing was about Harding Parade. So the nice picture we got of Harding Parade, I was thinking, you're going to make, if I've got this right, with the planters down the middle like that, you can make an incredibly difficult area for wheelchairs, double buggies, anything like that. We are reducing significantly the width of the pavement unless the area immediately adjacent to the road is sort of about half of what it currently is, do you think? I'm concerned that we can cause blockages, and it could be a very uncomfortable place to sort of try and just get past.
Yeah, Chair. So on that one, that's an error on our part, because there is an updated image on that, and whilst the other one's been updated, that hasn't. So we aren't suggesting planters down the middle of the pavement on that one. So the planters that we're suggesting are down the right-hand side in replacement of the current raised beds. And then just to pick up, Chair, on Councillor Nicholas' point about the fountain area. So just in case it isn't clear from this image, we're only suggesting screening on what is the west and the east side. So we wouldn't have it on the north and south, so it wouldn't all be enclosed, because part of the reason for that, you need to be able to see up and down as well. So that might help with concerns on that.
Councillor Camp.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nicholas taken one of the things I was going to say, but on tier two, actually three things. Firstly, Harding Parade. Given the thing we previously talked about this evening, how confident are we can get this land district in a sort of reasonable time frame? I'm aware that there may not be a simple answer to that one. Secondly, on the other sites that were mentioned that haven't been covered in this report, will we be making improvements to those sites, or is it just these ones initially, and then we might come back to the other ones in a few years? And then final point, just in case I'm being daft, it mentions that the concourse is covered in a separate report. I couldn't find it in my pack. Is that not coming to this meeting tonight?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. So the concourse is being dealt with by council.
That's fine. I just wanted to check I hadn't
Yeah.
missed something.
No. So the concourse is part of the vision work and proposal work the council's already considered. In terms of the timescales of the Harding Parade element, so in theory, it should be very straightforward to transfer this. We know the district previously have been up for transferring it because essentially it's just a bit of a liability for them at the moment.
Yes, what I can say on that is that at one point, all this stuff was part of my portfolio holder at district, the assets side of the council. And there was no budget for anything other than emergency repairs. So you notice that the bottom of the trees, there's brickwork which is all sort of falling away and all the rest of it. So, very difficult to get funding to get that sort of thing sorted out. So really, the sooner the trees are removed, or before that, as long as we can get the transfer and we can get rid of all that stuff and really improve it. I mean, the only positive thing you can say is at least with the development, as you come down from the station, at least with the development of that building on the left, I can't remember what it's called.
Station House, I think.
Station House.
Yeah.
Remember they used to have a sort of little hedge in front of it, and litter everywhere. At least that's all gone. So that is an improvement. Nothing to do with us, it's the development doing it. Things are improving slightly.
And Chair, just to pick up on the couple of other points. So in terms of a reasonable timescale, I think that depends on what the definition of reasonable is really, but I'm hopeful that we could get it quite quickly from the district council. I'm a bit concerned, have raised this to them before, there is a bit of a safety issue here because Councillor Ellis referred to the actual brickwork falling down. If those trees fail, then they're in a significant location and the potential damage that they will cause to the highway and surrounding buildings would not be good. I think if the town council wish to take on ownership at the appropriate time, I think we would look to try to get them removed just before we actually take ownership to eradicate some of the risk of that. We may have to fund that, but that would be probably a sensible thing for us to do. In terms of the other public ground that are listed in the report, so there will be plans for all of these. So these are the areas that are the biggest transformation. But in the report that comes forward next time, you'll see an action plan for all of the other spaces, but they're much smaller changes.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So a couple of points. First, on the fountain area, I think it's good you were saying just the east and the west, because the view from the visualisation here, you kind of lose the sight all the way down to the common, which is quite nice, sort of when you're sort of that opens that way. And then on Harding Parade, I know we're still really early compared to some of the other ones we're looking at. But I'm just a bit, that Councillor Court fully ripped my head off at the start comparing on bike trips. But I'm just wondering whether we're just a little bit on how the flow of people there, because you're kind of almost sort of shutting off access to round the road there to then get to the crossing, which would be a bit concerning. Like you're saying how you go down there at sort of 6 o'clock in the evening, get hundreds of people coming off the train at once or wanting to sort of go into the town. So I'd be a bit concerned about that. And also the sort of height of that. I mean, I think appearance is better, but I'm just worried about it's quite on, you've got the bleacher, you've got the crossing on Station Approach, and then you've got the sort of turning out onto the road. I'm just a bit worried about ensuring there's a flow of people around a side near the road, and then sort of how you kind of get sightlines there as well.
So, Chair, on that, I think this is one where we're trying to get the concept across in this image. I think what you'll see from the county version of this is it's much more talking about flows and probably looks a bit better and deals with the space in a more accurate way because their visuals are based on surveys and distances and that sort of stuff. But and in the same side, the actual bike storage here isn't quite to the right scale either, but it's kind of concept, if you like. But hopefully the Harding Parade will be better visualised when you see it at council, when the county put forward their.
Councillor Shriven.
Thank you, Chair. A few points. The first, going back to the transfer of ownership of the Harding Parade, presumably HTC wouldn't invest in it unless we had taken ownership, as is the case with Rothamsted, etc. Would it be the case that the county council would proceed with their plans, obviously with a question mark over where the funding might come from, despite, them not owning it? So that was the first question, really. So basically, would it happen if HTC can't take ownership and funding doesn't come from us? Is it not going to happen?
Yeah, so I should say the county council don't have any funding for the Harding Parade element. So they have done the visuals and design work as an extension of what they're talking about on the station and public realm. So they don't have any funding for this element. So we've kind of essentially utilised some of their design expertise to get them to visualise down Harding Parade for us. So they won't do any of this work unless there's two things. One, someone's going to fund it. Two, somebody's going to take ownership of that particular strip.
Then on page 33, there's a figure of 15,000 allocated for cycle racks. I was just wondering if that included those that we've received from the county council with the pedestrianisation, repurposing those ones. If that figure would be revised, I don't know if it would make a significant impact.
So, Chair, no, that doesn't include any that we've taken ownership of off the back of the high street recovery stuff. What I would probably just say in terms of the resource element, so at the time of the council allocating capital reserves, these were the kind of the broad themes that we were looking to allocate funding against. The way we are looking at it, and there is another resource in here as well, which is for water refill stations, which we are also exploring too in the high street. I think in reality, we will have a overall funding of 170,000 plus whatever the water refill stations are to deliver the public realm improvement plan. So as we get into the nitty gritty, whether we end up with £3 for defibrillators and 15 per cycle racks might not quite work out like that, but the whole package of funding will be used. I think that's probably how it will realistically happen.
The fountain area, a couple of things there. Permeability of all the surfacing that's going on, because it's obviously quite an extensive area, was one question. And surface water and the impact that might have on the road and what have you adjacent. The robustness of the trellising, because I could see that could quite easily be turned over. And the other thing was actually the water fountains, whether the plan was to have one in this location and similarly in the sensory garden.
Yeah, Chair. So the idea is to have one of the water refill stations here, if we can fix the problems with the water underground, because there's obviously that's a natural point for us. So that should be the case. The trellising will be robust. Anything we've put in place will be robust. And I appreciate the images here. It looks like the sort of D&Q jobbies, which it wouldn't be. Other DIY stores available. The surfacing will of course be permeable as well. So we'll need to think very carefully about that as to what that surfacing is like. Because obviously we know that we've got some drainage issues around that particular area.
And just one last thing, sorry if I may. On the sensory garden, just, and I know I've spoken to Carl about this before, the benches be accessible, wheelchair accessible, because obviously the ones illustrated here aren't. And then also wondered if it was worth having some kind of a dog type area, just because there is some play equipment and roads, and I could just imagine that families with pets might end up in the garden. So just something for consideration.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. I mean, all these comments are really useful, and when the actual action plan comes back, you'll see a lot more detail in this. It's worth saying that the action plan won't say that we'll be delivering this all instantly. Lots of this needs further detailed scoping. So the example like the type of surfacing and that sort of stuff. But the plan is to try to get an agreed kind of way forward, and we'll deliver some things quite quickly and early. We hope that there'll be some things that will be delivered over 2 to 3 years. It's a kind of a 3-year plan.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, one final one from me. Earlier, Carl, you mentioned that some of the land on Harding Parade, that there might be commercial opportunities on its own by the county council, and therefore we wouldn't be able to put commercial opportunities on them. Is there an opportunity for devolving that land from the county council that we could do that? I mean, I'm aware devolving assets is not a quick process to establish, but I just thought that might be a possibility.
Yeah, Chair. So there are possibilities not to devolve the land, the ownership of the land, but highways do issue licenses for land at times. Whether that would be viable for us, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I mean, generally, don't they own a strip along right next to the highway? So it's sort of like highway land, and then the rest of it is district owned.
Yeah, so it's actually a bit more complicated than that. So we thought it was that case for a long while until we saw the recent map. So on the so about 1.5 meters next to the road is highway. Then if you imagine where all the raised planters are now, that's all district. As soon as the planter ends, that is highway again. But actually, it is just a strip down the middle. So yeah, good old local authority land ownership is a bit complicated there.
We'll look into that.
It's just one thing that I understood the county was considering putting a lay-by in for a bus stop. Is that still in the pipeline somewhere? Or do you think county, when they come along, will have that as part of their plan?
So, Chair, I've certainly heard that before. I haven't heard that for a long while, and the proposals that we've seen from them don't include any bus lay-by along there. As I mentioned before, actually, they haven't got any funding to do anything along here. They've just taken an opportunity to get them to help us design visually what we might like to do. So there's no plans for that at all that I've seen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Yeah, I like these. I know the concepts, but they're great. One obvious thought is they're all very central. They're all going to be heavily used. You mentioned the fountain area. The grass has become mud, probably largely a result of the fruit store being there and a very valuable addition during COVID. But they're all going to have heavy usage. For example, the small area in the central garden. And so doing this, we should do it, implies there will be quite a bit of cost year after year in maintaining it, because it will soon degrade if it's not looked after. So this isn't a once only cost. That probably needs to be borne in mind with future budgets. On the Harding Parade, which is an interesting one, as you said, complicated as well, given the ownership split. A few thoughts. I certainly agree with your idea that where are the liabilities or potential liabilities and other trees. So Norman should sort that out before we get the transfer. Someone mentioned the access to the, I think it's Councillor Cowley, the Pelican Crossing. And at present, the raised beds don't align with getting to the Pelican Crossing. If the raised beds are going to be totally rebuilt, one should maybe have the gap. Pelican Crossing. It may seem obvious, by the way. The pavement where the planters are shown, even if they're going to stay, is sometimes used by cyclists, which is a bit dangerous, but they do that. You can be walking up the station in the morning and suddenly the bike coming up behind you and on the side of you. That's just something to be aware of when doing the design. Final point, obviously you give some thought to the surface. Having road tested this particular area coming out of the station and then going down for some 35 years, when it's icy, coming round that corner from the station approach, and I appreciate we can't do anything about station approach, then down here, certainly outside the Costa a little bit further down, it does become very slippery. which is partly because of the slope and partly because of the nature of the surface. I might be able to bear that in mind. Very much.
So, one other thing, Chair, probably speaking now as a personal thing, when Harding approach is discussed, do you think we ought to have our county councillor, who may have a bit more influence as the councillor for the actual area, on anything that we might want to do on the county council?
Yes.
Do you think she ought to be present so she hears the view?
Certainly be invited, yes.
Yes, sure. And will you be
Receptive to that, sure.
if available?
Good idea. We'll get a county perspective on it. Okay. Any other points, or are we done on this one? Okay. Recommendation 2.1.1. Agree the seeking of quotations for the proposed work depicted in Appendix A and the timeline for bringing back recommendations to this committee. Everybody okay with
So,
that?
sorry, being a bit pedantic. The clerk has explained that these are concepts, so we're not doing the works as depicted, we're doing the works broadly as depicted, or broadly according to the concepts depicted. It's not precisely as depicted. I don't care what the wording is, provided we understand that is what we're saying. There's a huge amount of latitude here.
Yeah, I think that would be our intention.
Yeah, Chair. So I think what we should really be saying here, apologies, I don't like that wording myself. So I think what we should be saying, we're asking you to agree the broad concepts you've seen so far, and for us to carry out further scoping and bring something back in line with the timeline that we've suggested, rather than quotations. That's it.
Right, so with that amendment to this officer report, they're already okay with that?
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. Right. Now moving on to review of memorials policy, starting on page 39. We definitely need a memorial policy, don't we? Because we haven't got one at the moment. And if you could take us through that one.
Yes, so Chair, the memorials policy was brought, as you will recall, to the September meeting of this committee for review to see full reapproval by the committee. The committee made some very good observations about the fact that the assessment table within the policy didn't make perfect sense and needed further work. So the committee required it to be brought back to this meeting after that work had been done. We did some work on the table, and although it was as good as we were going to get it, we still felt that it actually was open to misinterpretation. So you will see from the memorial policy now, we're recommending that the memorial policy now be approved minus that table, and it should make it easier for members of the public to understand. They tell us about the person that they want remembered. Council officers make recommendations to the committee, and the committee make the decisions as to whether or not they approve.
Chair, I could ask the officers. I much prefer the way you've dealt with that simplification. It's a sort of signpost of things we'll take into account and gives far more flexibility and it's far easier to follow. So thank you very much. Are there other changes in the policy? Because you haven't highlighted what other changes there might be and haven't been through it line by line.
So, Chair, the answer to that is that the memorials policy is as it was, with the table removed and that word in the place of the table.
Does this policy get reviewed on a certain basis, like every 3-5 years, or?
I think that I would say that we'd bring it back in 2 years for further review.
Yeah, because on some of our policies, I know policy looks to be like health and safety every year or so. So I was wondering whether, so there's a chance for future committee to view it.
Yes, Chair, it should come back in 2 years' time.
Yeah, cool.
Well, yes, and under the trackers and forward plans, we can always call for something to be reviewed.
Yeah, I mean, it might be as this gets applied, we spot things that we'd like to be put in the future.
Just a couple of small things. I'm not sure that we need the disclaimer. You've got this policy is not exhaustive in its subject to change. I'm not sure we do. But the other bit I wanted to just check with you. You've got consideration, this is under trees, will be given to species that will enhance an area and achieve a mix of species. But you've got native and non-native, and I wondered why we're including non-native. Why we wouldn't just go for native.
Yes, Chair, I think the answer to that is that sometimes it has been considered, depending on what the setting is, that a non-native tree would be appropriate in a given setting. But if the committee want to stipulate that it should just be native only, then we can amend it.
What do you think on that, Danny? I thought we could have reviewed, that would be part of the review process. So if you were looking at an individual situation for the committee to approve, and there was a non-native species in there, was you could take, that would be part of the appraisal process. Whether would that be sufficient?
Yes, I would just query why we would consider non-native, that's all.
Diversity, I suppose.
Yeah, these pesky things come into the country and
This isn't a Brexit point, is it?
It's not his job.
Can't get them in anyway.
I don't want biodiversity.
That's what I was thinking.
Any other comments on this report? Okay. Committee is asked to approve the memorials policy to Appendix A, which has been completely amended. 3.3.
Sorry, Chair, very representative, but just been told it hasn't been completely amended.
Delete completely.
So, Chair, just to clarify, when you saw this in September, it had a number of tweaks and amendments. At that point, you were, as I recall, you were satisfied with them. The issue was the table element, the scoring. Exactly. So this is the amended version, accepted amended changes from September, and in addition, the table has changed. So the things you've previously been okay with, plus the table. Right.
Shall we delete completely? Just put amended.
Yes, they can be changed.
In the interest of precision. Okay. All right. So with that change, is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Bus shelter replacement factory.
Chair, I think it's called.
Yeah, Chair, we're on 7.5, aren't we?
On this one.
Oral report. No Facebook.
There we are. Update on the Rockhampstead Park Management Plan. We will update.
Worked out the numbers for Ross.
Excellent, thank you, Chair. So this is a verbal update, but I have put together some slides just to visualise that, so you don't just get to listen to me. And apologies for the writing on the top of the screen now, I can't quite get rid of that, so not sure that shouldn't impact too much on visual. So essentially what I want to do is give an update on the management plan for Rockhampstead Park, which is in development at the moment. And in doing that, we'll touch upon the engagement survey, a bit about antisocial behaviour, access, skate park, goalpost, contract changes, and tree planting. And I do also at the end want to just give an update on the Spore relocation area, which is something we've given updates on the bulletin recently and using various emails. So in terms of the engagement survey, that is open until the 3rd of December. And So far, we've had 200, as of when I printed this picture, we had 240 responses, which is a really good response so far. And we've had a good mix of different ages and people who attend Rockhampton Park different times, so daily, weekly and monthly. So we've been really pleased so far with the response. We are expecting a lot more to come in, not least because Park are very kindly running an engagement as part of the Christmas Carnival next Sunday. So we're expecting this number to jump up a lot more as well. Worth adding in terms of the younger people, the under 24s on this, if you looked at this probably 2 weeks ago, unsurprisingly, these figures were pretty much zero. So we have done lots of engagement with schools, circulated it to scout groups and other similar youth organisations. But actually, we've also, I say we, Claire, our comms officer, and Heather, our internal ops manager, have been out talking to young people in the park and around the high street. So we've been able to capture their views so far as well, which is very important and completely in line with our youth engagement policy as well, which is obviously really important to us. So a good start in terms of numbers. One of the questions we're asking is what do you think of the plan itself? And we're getting lots of different written content for that, which will all be analysed shortly after the engagement closes and will be used to inform the subcommittee meeting in early January that will then make a recommendation to this committee in mid-January for approval. Now, I just took this snapshot. This was the snapshot in front of me in answer to the what do you think about the plan? And the reason I just took this was because kind of bizarrely, these four things kind of represent the four overall things we're hearing. So the top two, just because that, looks great, but also actually so many people are saying it's really, really good. They really hit the spot with this and you thought of so many different things. So that is a big thing. It's one of the key words is, the most populated word in the responses is good. But then taking the third point down there, actually, this is a really important point for us and for anybody considering this. And that's around getting a balance. So Rockhampton Park has got so many different users, and there is a real danger that we do too much towards one direction that actually inadvertently impacts on another user. So the plan is pretty balanced at the moment, and it's really important that we continue to do that. The last point in there is really important because where there are key themes identified, other than people saying that they think it's really good, is around security and antisocial behaviour. Now, there are two reasons for this, I believe. Firstly, because there's no escaping, we do have an antisocial behaviour issue in the park that we have been looking to address for some time. But secondly, where we've had some recent incidents, we've been working with parents of one particular lad to help promote the survey and get as many people as possible commenting on it and feeding back. So that's one of the reasons why there's a heavy influence on security and antisocial behaviour within there. So the comments so far are pretty good, but we'll be making a full analysis of what's said and bringing that through to the subcommittee and through to this committee in January. So that's that in terms of the engagement survey. There are a few things that I wanted to flag that we have started to do already. So the management plan sets the vision for what we're going to do from the next financial year, but we've already started to make improvements, and those improvements are broadly around two themes. So kind of health and safety sort of issues that we've got at the moment, and secondly, what I would just describe as TLC. There are things that we can do that actually, with a bit of TLC, make the park so much better. And so rather than waiting for the management plan, we try to crack on and do that. So we've got some visuals to help reflect that. So in terms of antisocial behaviour, this is the image from the CCTV camera that is now up in the new location by the multi-use games area. So it's a 360 camera. That phase one of that installation is now complete. This is just kind of depicts the quality of the image that we get. Really, really high quality image. I think we've shared some others before. So really, really pleased with that element of the CCTV work. And there's more to do on that. And we're now looking at the scoping the next bit.
Will it sort of focusing?
Yeah,
like the ones on the top of the Civic Centre.
Yeah, so it's the same system. Yes, Chair. So this is 24/7 control room monitored camera. So it rotates around, has a home position, and can kind of come in and out of different things.
That's from that very point. That quality is clearly excellent, but how does it look at night time?
Excellent.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the standards are really, really high, and we're very confident that these cameras will be very useful in as a deterrent, but also where there are crimes and helping to bring people to justice.
Sorry, possibly a very stupid question relating very specifically to this image, but is that tree fuller in the summer? Because I can just see a potential, you could get a spot, it's a blind spot behind it otherwise, if it is, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be fuller, Chair. I think so far we've done all the work on the trees that we think is reasonable, that won't be a detriment to the trees. So to be honest, the only alternative to that is to remove that tree. There wouldn't be any work you could do on that that would then leave the tree in a healthy state. So we are kind of stuck with that, or we move it, which probably isn't further option. Cool. So again, another CCTV image, but this time this is used to really show the work that we've done on the tree canopy along the what is Coach Lane along our land. So hopefully you'll recall that the canopy was actually pretty much touching the ground before. So you could be in that woodland looking out and nobody could really see you in. So far from ideal. So we've raised the canopy, which makes a big difference in terms of the exposure for that area. And that CCTV image not only shows the fact that we can see that area from the CCTV, but also the work that we have carried out. We are hopeful that having exposed that area, it makes it less, less likely that people will hang around in the area. But also, by allowing light in, we're hopeful that there's kind of the brambles that you see in the middle or to the right of that image may have the opportunity to grow in that no man's land, which would in itself become a deterrent for anybody wishing to go in. So hopefully there's a bit of a natural thing that will happen to help us with that. So that's CCTV, tree canopy, and social behaviour stuff. The next image starts to talk about the kind of the TLC element. So the left-hand image here is a really nice kind of plaque, if you like, about Rothamsted Park that reflects the Hartford Urban District Council times, which you just can't read. So we're going to be giving that to clean. There is a bin directly located below it, which doesn't look good either. So we're going to look to potentially relocate that. So there's a bit of cleaning there that we'll be doing fairly soon. And in the two columns, as you enter the park, you'll see the left one is the one that was removed and replaced and has had a nice clean, and the right one is looking a bit sorry for itself. So again, we are going to bring those both up to the same kind of look through a bit of cleaning on those. So a bit of TLC there. So these images really relate to access. So first of all, the image on the left-hand side here is the existing gate not far into the park. So there's a couple of main issues with this at the moment. First of all, on a very practical level, the members of the team that use that run the Eric Morecambe Centre keep leaving it open, not locking it. We even had one case where they wrote the number of the lock on the actual padlock itself so they could remember what it was. So we are continuing to ask them not to do that, but actually we are not sure we're ever going to get through. So what we're going to do to help deal with that issue and another issue, which is that this is a bottleneck. So if you're a cyclist coming into the park or you're in a pushchair, you have to come up onto the park. So what we'll be doing very shortly is locking the gate open. We won't remove the gate, but locking it open. And instead, in the middle of the pathway there, we'll have a drop-down bollard that will be up. And so that allows people to pass through, but also prevents people from driving up there when they're not allowed to. The right image, so if you see the end of the railing on the right side, this is just past the car park or the back entrance to the Eric Morecambe Centre. So with the drop-down bollard being further down, just in case that gets left open, what we're going to do is we'll introduce a second bollard in the middle of this bit here as well that will be locked open at all times. The only people that have access to that is our contractor and the town council itself. So there won't be any risk of anyone from any neighbouring building leaving that open so that we can't, so we don't get any unauthorised access across the park. So
and emergency services?
So
access?
yeah, so Phil is the main liaison in terms of emergency services, and we're in contact with them an awful lot. So they get codes, and quite often they've had to cut locks off, which is fine. So we work really closely with them, but they'll be given the relevant details.
So Cameron. Thanks, Joe. Is there a particular reason why we can't always have the one here up as well? I'm not quite sure which vehicles are getting access halfway up that don't need full access. You get what I mean?
So both posts will always be up.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'll always be up, but the one at the bottom, because there are users that we essentially can't control, they might accidentally forget to lock it over the weekend. So if we have the one further up, that prevents anybody getting further up. So, but they both will be up.
But remember, I think the answer to Councillor County is that there's this roadside of there at Morecambe, there's space for several cars, and as we came in this evening, there were 3 cars there anyway, whether they're disabled or what they are, the cars come and go there.
Okay, so the next 2 images, again, following the line of the kind of the TLC priorities. So the left-hand side is the rose garden. So we've obviously got the roses in the centre circle, and we've got 2 half moons either side. Now, last year, what was put down there by the contractors and the district council was essentially wildflower seeds, which made those 2 half moon areas just look pretty dreadful, in my opinion, and others' opinion. So rather than do that again in future, we've invested a small amount of money to buy some more roses for the rose garden. So they'll be planted out at some point in the near future to make that even more attractive as it is. The image on the right-hand side just shows some general wear and tear on some of the grass around the edges where contractors, and this does include our contractor, like to cut corners and cause damage. So we're utilising some of the wooden bollards that we have essentially in stock at the storage depot to put them along that extension of that fence line there, just to help protect that land somewhat.
Can I just say something about the rose garden? Because you have to be really careful about rose sickness. So if you've had failed roses, you shouldn't replant roses. That's any help at all.
Okay. We'll pass that on to Tim. So Tim's a bit of Tim Under Green Space Development Officer, is a bit of an expert on these things. So we'll pass it on. He's someone that's on the board with that. That's that slide. And then the next slide, just changing theme completely to football and back to health and safety. So these are the football goalposts that we currently have in the park. Now, you don't have to be an expert to look at these and say they're not in the best shape. They've got a safety feature missing on the right-hand post if you look at it. And they are essentially no longer fit for purpose. We have taken a decision internally, because they are so not fit for purpose, to invest in new ones. So we will be replacing all those that need replacing. We're replacing with ones that have got some pretty good security features on them. But we have got to the point where, or close to the point where, junior football will not be allowed to go ahead on the pitches, because as part of their risk assessment pre-match, these will fail. So we're taking the decision to get those replaced.
Sorry, Carl, how long will that be? How soon are you able to do that?
Oh, great question. So we've placed the order, haven't we? So I think there's a lead-in time of, what was it, 2 weeks that we saw today?
My apologies, I can't remember what it is.
Okay, so I think 2 to 4 week lead-in time to actually get them, but then installation, probably a couple more weeks on top of that, because we're actually going to pay someone to come in to concrete them in, and they have to be done properly in the right way. So we're going to pay for someone to do that. So yeah, probably a New Year thing, I would have thought.
It's really great. Thanks.
That is one crossbar challenge away from falling apart in golf.
Just we've been through this in the Park Committee. Point out that the consequence of cementing them in is that the goalposts will remain there throughout the year. We will no longer have the summer period where you substantially have 2 cricket pitches and without goalposts in view. So some people, it'll be sad to see goalposts when you don't need them, but that's probably makes sense because they can be concreted in. If you didn't concrete them in, what do you do with them? And so that was pointing it out.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's the sockets that are concreted in, so they can still be removed.
Okay.
So the way in which it works, you concrete the sockets in, which have a key safety feature within them, that secures them. You still can remove them or key times. The issue with that is, in order to preserve them, you need to completely take them apart. You need to keep them in certain ways, and you haven't actually got anywhere to put them current time. But the opportunity will still be available to take them up if you need to.
Thank you. Okay, any comments on Carl's presentation that we haven't already covered?
Just quickly on the goalposts, it's so a couple are actually on the outfield and the cricket, aren't they? So they will have to come out every year if they're on the outfield.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So what we do with cricket and football is got to be completely complementary. So we've got agreements with Hartland Common Cricket Club now, new agreement with Coles. That has to work kind of hand in hand. So we will be doing that as we need to. There is a couple more items to cover, Chair, on this, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So both of them really important items. So this plan here is broadly our plans for tree planting and new meadows in Rockhampton Park. This is something that will be set out in the actual management plan itself. But if I broadly take you through this, and credit to Tim, who's developed this very quickly for us using his expertise. So on the right hand side of the picture, the blue shape is the tree canopy work that we've carried out and talked about already. The red shapes are new meadow areas that we're considering where we let the grass grow longer in areas of the park that it suits. The green shapes are trees. So we're suggesting having a huge tree planting programme around the areas that we've got there. Two clear benefits for that. One, from a biodiversity point of view, but also trees play a huge impact on water and dealing with flood surface water issues. And at the top of the park, which is the left-hand side, the yellow rectangle is an existing hedge that the proposal is to allow that to grow much higher, so it becomes a wildlife hedge within the park. So these are plans that will be within the draft management plan, but the subcommittee have had a look at them, and I just thought I would flag them to you this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. There appears to be what looks like a very large blue patch in the middle of that. Is that on the map, or is that something new? In the middle of all the green trees?
The ponds.
That's fine. I just thought I'd check, because it looked like it might be a colour from my angle.
No, so Chair, the reason why that's there is two reasons. One, because that's probably what it looks like over the winter in recent years. The two, our flood mitigation work. We are considering whether that is a natural location to put upon. So that's why that kind of blue colour is there, just as an indicative thing where we place the trees around it. Thank you.
Just on the left-hand side, west side, the yellow rectangle, the hedge which you're going to allow to grow. There is another, well, there's a point of view, of course, that it's quite pleasant to look after the park into effectively the countryside, the Rothsford estate. And if the hedge is too tall, then that view would be lost, at least in certain parts of the park. It may be because of height differences, you get it from a further distance away. But how tall do you think we make it? Or just let it grow and see how tall it gets, I suppose.
Yes, so I don't actually know what the height would be for it to be a wildlife hedge, but I think ultimately that would be a decision for council. Does it want to prioritise having that sort of wild hedge, or prioritising view out the park? So entirely down to or this committee actually at the point at which improving the management plan. So one for discussion. But an idea to one of the issues with the park at the moment is it lacks some focused biodiversity initiatives within it. It's very light on that at the moment. So that's one of the reasons for that potential idea.
There is actually a little area of trees beside the hedge. Still already. So, well, there was quite a lot of biodiversity around them. Mind you, we have seen perhaps the less well-behaved members of the British public using Rothamsted fields to come in through gaps. And that's an escape route for them sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there is environmental benefits and biodiversity going on in there. I think there's not much managed biodiversity, if you like, or planned. I think that's probably what I would rephrase that as. There are a couple of other things, Chair, just to mention. So in terms of the skate park, so the skate park, we carried out a ROSPA inspection on that recently, and it broadly told us what we thought it would, thankfully, and that is basically that it's past its lifespan, that there are no significant risks associated to it that need us to carry out immediate action, barring a few getting rid of some bolts and sticking out, things like that, in some of the frame. So that was pretty positive. And the other thing, just to conclude on that side of things, before I talk about the spoil area, is that we've made changes to the contract with John O'Connor, mainly around sports booking. So where I mentioned before, we've got arrangements with the cricket club now, who have already started to transform that bottom cricket square, something that today looks amazing, and with the Colts, who will take more responsibility for the football pitches. The benefit of doing that, actually, there is a very practical benefit in that the ground gets looked after better, but also we've been able to take income from that, whereas previously the income from sports bookings went into the contractor. It now comes to us under the new arrangement. So it's kind of win-win all round for the town council anyway.
Well, I think one thing we can definitely say is this is getting much more closer and more creative management than it ever did when it was under district management. So good for the town.
So in terms of the spoil relocation area, Chair, so there are some things I just do want to say on that, and forgive me if this is quite lengthy, but there's some key points I just want to make sure are landed with the committee formally. So, you know, as a recap, you know that the area that's fenced off at the moment was used as a spoil relocation for the leisure development, rather than take it off site. And whilst the town council owns that land at the moment, it is still subject to a licence with the district council, who have responsibility for it until the point that it's made good and the planning conditions that were required of the district for that spoil relocation have been delivered. Broadly, that is linked to it making sure that there aren't any negative consequences from drainage, that it's safe and it's usable for the purpose that it's supposed to be used for. We've had lots of site visits, and including the subcommittee came out recently to have a look at the site itself. And as officers, we've really been monitoring this closely and liaising with the district council. So we are, and have been really hopeful to try to recommend to council by now that I am satisfied that the conditions have been met and that we should remove the licence, because ultimately we want to get it open as soon as possible. But my conclusion so far is the same, that we can't be satisfied with the condition that it's in, and I haven't seen enough evidence to suggest that the planning conditions have been met. And I have set that out to district council. There are 4 key areas that I've got concerns with, and I think that's shared by others, and it's officer concerns more broadly. So 1 is around the volume of stones that are still on the site. 2 is the apparent uneven surface that's been left on the pitch. 3rd is pooling of water in certain areas, and the concern that actually the condition at the moment and what's been left behind, it will have negative consequences on surface water. And finally, the quality of grass, not necessarily the most important of those 4 at the moment, but nevertheless an important factor. So I have asked for clarity from the district council on a number of areas, ranging from, and these are areas that are taken from the method statement and the contract specification that has been used to discharge the planning conditions. So the planning authority have said, we discharge these conditions if you follow these two documents, basically. So my starting point has been to review those, and there are a number of things in there that I've asked for clarity from the district on, ranging from the area being laser graded, rolled, through to ensuring that washed sand was put down at the point at which the topsoil was added, and lots of other things around decompaction, grass cutting, these other different things. And crucially, that within the specification, that stones and earth clods over 25 millimetres were removed from the site prior to seeding. So I've asked for clarity on lots of these different things, and I know I've shared with all councillors for this at various stages. I've had some responses back, which broadly, for me, show two things, and that is that, well, three things. One is that some of the conditions I think probably have been satisfied within the method statement. Two, some certainly haven't, based on the evidence that I've been given and the responses I've been given. And three, there are instances where some of the work that was due to take place at the point of construction, they're planning to do in the future, for example. So those three kind of points really lead me to my conclusion that I can't be satisfied to recommend to council at this time that that area is removed from any licence. So one of the key areas that I'm concerned about links back to flood risk assessment. Now, in the flood risk assessments that were carried out as part of the planning process, and that were later reflected in the method statement and the contractor spec, it talks about drainage issues on the site, and it talks that ideally you would put a drainage system in place at the point of construction. Now, that isn't necessarily a realistic thing for a site of that size, but what it talks about that if you do not do that, there are a series of mitigating actions that should be carried out in order not to have a negative impact on drainage in that. And the sorts of things that I've asked for clarity on are the mitigating actions that in the documents themselves were supposed to be carried out. And unfortunately, many of those are the things that haven't been done. So I'll give you an example. The documents very clearly say that at the point of the topsoil being laid down, washed sand should be added to that in order to aid drainage. Now, that hasn't been done. We're told that they're going to add 200 tonnes of sand in April next year, which is retrospective action on it, but actually may not have any positive impact at all. So, for example, if you put that sand down and you have a heavy rain in the next couple of days, that sand's going to wash away. So, in my view, some of that retrospective action certainly doesn't align with the documents as part of the planning, and certainly won't, or has the potential not to have a positive impact on the site. So we're still having lots of conversations. I wanted to kind of lay down the marker at this committee in terms of my views on what we've seen so far. We have asked for kind of evidence in our responses. So we're trying to avoid any subjective element to this. We want to know that where a document said this will happen, has it happened? And the responses we've had back so far have not been clear on that. We'll continue to liaise with them over the next few weeks. But as it stands at the moment, certainly before the new year, I can't imagine myself and officers being in a position to recommend to council that the area is opened again. Of course, council could take a view that they wish to open it, but my recommendation is we can't because the conditions haven't been met. So I just wanted to appreciate it's a lengthy update on that, but I think it's such an important subject. I wanted you all to hear our advice and position on that.
Thank you very much. Right, who was first? Let's start with David, please.
Carl, just a general thing. Tonight, we've heard many problems with district. 4 people here, also district councillors. I'm a little bit perturbed with the delay on the transfer of the parks, Rothamsted, stone picking or whatever it's meant to be. Is there just a general background? With my other head, I know of other problems in the legal department at the moment, with things getting severely delayed and put off, and 3 months to reply to emails and that. Is there things going on there that really we should be aware of as district councillors as well as town councillors? This is not the way I would expect us to be looked after or helped?
Yeah, so Chair, I think it's probably difficult for me to comment on that mainly because it is kind of a district council matter. I mean, what I would say is that there are, from what I see, there are an awful lot of good officers at district council that are overwhelmed in terms of the volume of work that they've got to do. So there appears to be some areas that are under resourced. So legal is a really good example. We've got a number of legal matters with the districts at the moment that are all behind, and we're told that it is a capacity issue. So there are capacity issues within that. I don't know what causes that within the district council. What I would say is that from my experience, there are things that are being made much more complicated than they need to be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Carl, just picking up on your point about the mitigating steps that they should have taken in remedying the spoil relocation. You talked about them adding 200 tonnes of washed sand. 200 tonnes sounds minuscule for an area. I mean, are they talking about just the football pitch area? Are they talking about the whole spoil relocation area? And basically, sort of, at what point do you say, well, don't waste your money buying in 200 tonnes of sand? That's not going to do the job. And will, of course, if that's scheduled for April, does that mean that the park will remain closed and out of bounds until then?
Yeah, so Chair, in terms of the sand side of things, we think that, I mean, 200 tonnes sounds a lot, but actually that is quite a thin layer that would go on there. And okay, you know, I'm not a technical ground expert, but we've got lots of experts in the team, and we know enough around our own kind of personal interests that the idea is what was set out in the method statement of construction spec, in that is added to the topsoil at the point of construction to maximise the drainage. So yes, it will be a thin layer of sand. I'm not 100% clear where it will be, whether it's just on the football pitch site. It probably is, I think. That's one of the things I need to double check. So it will be a thin layer. There's no guarantees that it will work. As I mentioned, if you get bad weather, April showers, and we're in a bit of trouble. But I think what is pretty much clear to me is that that is an inferior solution to what was set out in the documents that were supposed to be followed. So going back to how the area gets opened, I can't, as I said, I can't see myself being in a position to recommend to council. So I look at this very pragmatically and say, right, these are the things that are supposed to happen. And once I've had enough evidence to say that they are going to happen or have happened in the way that they're supposed to, I can then comfortably recommend that the process has been followed. I can't imagine I'm going to be in that position for some time, but that, I mean, that doesn't stop the council saying, actually, we wish to reopen that area. That would be entirely a reasonable thing to consider, but I think it would be unlikely that that would be opened having had the planning condition elements fulfilled, in my opinion, based on what I've seen so far.
Just come back from that.
Supplementary.
Is it just then worth putting out some comms to the public that it won't be open? I think there's an expectation that it will be opening towards the end of this year. I think we're going to overshoot that, so it might just be worth getting something out.
Yeah, Chair, that's a really important point. And I think what we have been, so it's very much on our radar. We need to update our comms because practically the posters in the park have said, you know, they're coming to the point of the end of the time we said on that. What we wanted to do is wait until we get the responses from districts so we exactly know what the position is. Because, you know, trying to be ever hopeful, I was hopeful that some of the responses that come back actually showed that the work had been carried out in the way that we might expect, and then maybe it could be reopened. I mean, there is an option to reopen elements of it, but we would probably then have to close it again at another point in the future for remedial works. So it's far from ideal. And there are lots of other measures as well that haven't gone into detail around decompaction and aerating of surfaces, all of which are things that are vital for drainage and vital for the quality of the ground and the grass coverage, all of which haven't necessarily happened right at the start, which you hope they would have done. Which I think, so when the subcommittee, when we saw some pooling of water in different places, that's partly to do with the poor drainage in the area.
Thank you, Chair. 2 or 3 points. if I may. Councillor Heritage was asking are the things wrong with the district council, and this is perhaps not the right forum. The town clerk gave a very diplomatic answer, and there's a very practical reason why we can't go into that as well, and that is we'd probably be here all night. The second point, I'm not an expert, and I clearly haven't spent the amount of time that officers have on the soil relay area. On the top dressing, which is what it's called when you put sand, usually sand and soil on top of a golf course or your own front lawn, you're normally doing that as an annual thing to improve something that's already in good condition. And I can't conceive putting that on top of something which is in poor condition, actually achieving very much, which is probably agreeing very much with what the town clerk said. I did go around it as the committee did a week or two ago, and as a layman, it's just rubbish. There are far too many stones. It's uneven. It's not safe. There's no way we should be accepting it in anything like its present condition. And the sooner we can bring this to a head, whether we need further expert advice as to what SADC really need to do more than what they're doing, then the better. Otherwise, it's going to drag on, and we should not cave in because they've done a very poor job. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the sand going down on it, you mentioned that helped with drainage. Does that help with the stones as well? I would imagine it doesn't, in my experience. These sorts of things are correct, but it's been a long time since I've dealt with fields of any kind.
Yeah, Chair. So essentially, the sand going mixed in with the topsoil had nothing to do with stones. It is purely to do with the quality of the drainage and the trying to achieve the best condition of grass in the ground. Essentially, the stones will remain an issue for as long as the stones are there, because they will continue to come through.
Sorry, as a supplementary, has the district, you may have said it, I may have missed it, but is there the district council a plan for removing the stones, or are they more concerned with the drainage and the other perhaps more serious issues?
Yeah, so I can only answer that factually. So from a factual point of view, they've carried out a number of stone picks on the land, and they are continuing to commit to doing more of those. If I go back from a factual point of view in terms of the documents that are used, the documents, and potentially, I don't know, maybe there's a bit of subjectivity to this, but the documents say that stones exceeding 25 millimetres will be removed prior to seeding. So their answer in response to that is they buried the stone. So whether burying and removal is the same thing from a technical point of view, I don't think it is. And again, potentially subjective, whether one is inferior to another, that's to be decided. But from a factual, this is what the document said would happen, and this is what has happened. Those two things don't match up. There is a wider debate, and not for me to go into, but actually there's a wider debate to say whether the methodology that was agreed in the documents in the first place was the right methodology. But that's a debate for somebody else. Looking at this factually from an officer point of view, to recommend to council, we look at what's said versus what we're told has been done, or visually what we see has been done.
Just to follow up on that, is there, stone picks, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the method, but it sounds like a slower process than one would like. Is there not a more drastic thing we can get them to do to sort of almost take it off and sort it out and then relay it? I'm just thinking in terms of time frames, we're already talking 6 months to sort out some of these issues. It strikes me that perhaps we're in territory where forcing them to sort it out on a more fundamental level might be quicker, nothing else.
Yeah, so I think there is a real danger that this goes on for a period of time and we are still in the same spot. Phil, without putting you on the spot, do you want to share the kind of the independent view that we got on what needs to happen some months ago from the contract, from a separate contractor that we took the opportunity to get their views on, but nothing to do with current setup?
Yes, Chair. So in brief, the contractor went and had a look at the site, and then the analysis conclusions that he came to were that the best outcome would be to rip all the grass off of it, remove all the stones properly with a machine and start the reseeding again.
Is it removed to what depth?
We didn't go into that detail because he wasn't actually here for that purpose. He was actually here to mend the big rutting that we had.
Well, you have to go down a certain, I mean, I'm no expert on these things, but it seems to me that, you know, you remove the stones, but unless you've done it properly, next time it rains, more stones come on.
Yep.
Now, this is poor contract management, basically. Councillor.
Yeah, can I ask about the uneven surface? So when the subcommittee went around, we noticed there was undulating. Is there anything that you've heard from officers at Sylvans about how that's going to be solved?
So, in terms of that, Chair, I mean, I've been told it, so I can pass on the information because you've asked the question. So, as I understand it, there is going to be a topography survey undertaken on the site that one of the district officers, the Green Spaces team, has been very proactive with, where they're having a survey done on another site somewhere else in the district. Some of the time that they're paying for that, they're asking the contractor to come have a look and do a survey on this site. So that's a really, really good thing for them to do. And I'm really pleased about that. I'm really grateful for them to do that. What that will show in terms of the lay of the land will be what the planning conditions said was going to be delivered versus what it looks like now. So that will give us real practical evidence on that element. So it may well be, and having looked at it today when the grass has been cut, the levels don't look as bad compared to when the grass was longer. So it doesn't look as bad. But even if that element is solved, that is one of multiple concerns within the document. That's different to the sand and drainage and the stone side of things. But we are really grateful that they're going to get a survey done that will at least cover off that bit.
So is the planning condition was that it was meant to be dead flat, or as flat to the sea, play football?
Yeah, so the conditions wouldn't have been dead flat, but as part of the planning application, there would have been a topography survey done that said this is what it looks like pre spoil relocation.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to deliver.
Yeah.
So essentially, what we're told now is they delivered the topography that it's supposed to. They said they would. Yeah. So this survey will ignore anything that's gone on what it used to look like, but we'll say is what's there at the moment post spoil relocation what was said was going to be in the planning, which is the crucial element. I mean, there's always going to be an elevation to it.
Yes.
But it's whether you get the kind of the ups and downs that when we went on site, it looked like there was.
Yeah.
But being factual, having gone out today, it looks a lot better now that the grass is cut, which is what we wanted to see.
Okay, thanks.
It's 9 o'clock. I think I need to move us on, even though this is an important issue. Well, thank you for the update. And I'll just have to wind it up. Okay. Moving on to 7.6, the page 45, the bush shelter replacement. And this is fairly standard stuff. The only comment I had on that was, whether we could make the bus shelter in some way sort of like town council brand.
Yeah, we'll get ready for the buses running later.
Well, I don't know if that's feasible. I mean, if it's going to cost a lot of money, well, forget it. But what do you think? I mean, there's some very smart bus shelters around. I mean, for example, in Manchester, there's some, where they have a sort of coloured strip along the top in the town colours and all that sort of stuff. I'll just leave that with you as a thought. I think some of our branding is really good, particularly the stuff at Marquis Lane. For example, we go down to, really smart electric. If it were possible to do something similar to that, and I don't mean a wooden shelter, just maybe a strip along the top, with town colours on it or something like that, rather than just a fairly utilitarian thing like that. That was the only comment I had. Has anybody got any comments on this report? Okay, can we move to the recommendation? Approve the installation of a new bus shelter in Batford to replace the existing shelter. Approve the release of £5,000 from the earmark reserves to fund this replacement. Thank you. Right, we have to resolve to move into part 2, don't we?
That's correct, Chair, yeah.
But, okay, can we resolve that? We need to look at some confidential information, even though there's, thank you, even though there's nobody from the public here.
Well, they might be online.